The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked with the indifference of old money, its chimes muffled by the relentless downpour outside. Alexander Harrington, tech mogul, philanthropist on paper, king of algorithms that predicted human folly, pushed open the heavy oak door earlier than the household staff anticipated. His Bentley had idled in rush-hour gridlock, but a sudden board call had freed him, sending him barreling down Ocean Boulevard toward the sanctuary of his waterfront mansion. Water streamed from his tailored coat as he shook off the storm, expecting the familiar hush of his domain. Crystal decanters glinting in the library. The faint scent of Elena's jasmine perfume lingering from her morning yoga session, but the air carried something sharper. A child's muffled sob, raw and animal, cutting through the patter of rain on marble floors. Alexander froze, his polished loafers rooted to the Persian rug. From the sunroom, beyond the arched doorway, came the unmistakable thud of flesh against flesh, followed by a gasp that twisted like a knife in his gut. He moved silently, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name, his heart pounding in a rhythm no spreadsheet could forecast. There, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows streaked with rivulets of water, stood his wife, Elena. Her blonde hair, usually a cascade of effortless elegance, clung damply to her flushed cheeks. Her tennis skirt was askew, one espadrille heel lifted mid-motion as if the storm had caught her in a private tantrum. And at her feet, crumpled against the baseboards like discarded laundry, was little Maya, the 8-year-old daughter of their live-in maid. Rosa, Maya's school uniform, a thrift store find starched with care, was muddied from the garden where she'd been helping with chores. Her small frame shuddered, arms wrapped around her knees, as a fresh welt bloomed red across her shin from Elena's kick. Alexander's world tilted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was venom, pure and distilled, the kind that simmered in whispers at country club brunches and now boiled over in his home. Maya's dark curls matted with tears, her wide eyes, mirrors of a fear too ancient for a child, locked onto his for a split second before darting away. Elena hadn't noticed him yet, her lips curled in a snarl of entitlement, muttering under her breath about dirty little thieves and lessons in respect. The rain hammered harder, as if the sky itself recoiled. What had sparked this? A spilled glass of lemonade? A forgotten toy? In that frozen instant, Alexander felt the weight of every unchecked privilege crashing down. He had built empires on data, but here was the unquantifiable, the raw fracture of humanity, etched in the bruise on a black child's skin, and in the shadows of his own making. Alexander Harrington's life was a masterpiece of calculated ascent. Born to Midwestern academics who scraped by on grants and grit, he had clawed his way into Silicon Valley's inner sanctum, founding a predictive analytics firm that now whispered secrets to Fortune 500 boards. At 42, his net worth eclipsed the GDP of small nations, manifested in the Harrington estate, 20 acres of hibiscus-lined drives, a infinity pool that kissed the Atlantic, and wings of the house dedicated to art collections that screamed old-world taste masking new-world ruthlessness. He prided himself on progressivism, donations to civil rights NGOs, board seats at diversity initiatives, but it was the performative kind, the sort that padded tax returns without pricking the bubble of his comfort. Elena had been the sparkle in that bubble, met at a Hamptons gala where her laughter cut through cigar smoke like champagne fizz. Heiress to a faded shipping fortune, she embodied the ease of inherited grace. Pilates sculpted limbs, a wardrobe of neutrals that whispered wealth without shouting. Their marriage, 8 years strong, was a tableau of Instagram envy. Galas arm in arm, whispered endearments over caviar. But beneath the gloss, fissures ran deep. Elena's world was one of unexamined inheritance, where help, like Rosa, was furniture with feelings, occasionally inconvenient. Rosa Morales, 41 and wiry from years of double shifts, had crossed their threshold 3 years prior, fleeing a crumbling economy in Guatemala that funneled her to Florida's service underbelly. She cleaned, cooked, and vanished into the shadows, her English clipped but her work impeccable. Maya, her only child from a marriage dissolved by distance and despair, was the quiet orbit around her mother's labor. A bright-eyed girl with braids tied in ribbons scavenged from estate scraps, devouring library books on dinosaurs and dreams deferred. The household rhythm was a delicate machine. Alexander's dawn departures for Miami high-rises, Elena's afternoons at spas and socials, Rosa's invisible toil from pre-dawn to dusk. Maya attended the local public school on a scholarship Alexander vaguely recalled approving, her presence tolerated as an extension of Rosa's utility. Whispers of tension had bubbled up, Elena's offhand gripes about the girl's messiness, the way Maya's laughter echoed too freely through the halls, but Alexander dismissed them as marital static, buried under deal closings and donor luncheons. He saw Rosa's bowed head as diligence, not deference, Maya's shy waves as precocious charm, not the guarded hope of a child navigating white spaces. Yet curiosity gnawed at him now, retroactively sharpening the edges of memory. Last week's dinner party, where Elena had joked about exotic spices in Rosa's tamales, her eyes sliding past the cook as if she were scenery. The time Maya's drawing, a crayon collage of the estate's peacocks, hung crookedly on the fridge, only for Elena to reposition it lower out of adult sightlines. And the storm today, unseasonal and fierce, mirroring the undercurrents Alexander had long ignored. As he lingered in the doorway, pulse thundering, the setup of his life crystallized. A facade of equity built on the backs of those like Rosa, whose silence bought survival. The kick wasn't isolated. It was the eruption of a volcano fed by years of microaggressions, the casual cruelty of class laced with color. Maya's sob pulled him forward, a magnetic force against his paralysis. What injustices had he enabled, not with malice but with the blindness of the unbitten? The rain blurred the windows, washing away illusions, and in that suspended breath, Alexander stepped into the sunroom, not as savior, but as a man finally seeing the stains on his own hands. The sunroom, once a haven of wicker loungers and potted orchids, transformed into a tableau of reckoning under the storm's gray pall. Alexander's shadow stretched long across the tile as he crossed the threshold, the squelch of his wet soles announcing him like a verdict. Elena whirled, her heel finally planting, composure snapping back like a rubber band stretched too taut. But the damage lingered in the air. Maya's whimpers, the acrid tang of fear sweat mingling with petrichor. Rosa, summoned by the commotion from the laundry wing, hovered at the periphery, her apron twisted in fists calloused from bleach and betrayal, eyes darting between her daughter and the missus with the wariness of one who knew the script all too well. But Alexander's silence stretched, a chasm widening with each bite he couldn't swallow. The night deepened, the storm relenting to a drizzle that tapped like impatient fingers. Sleepless, he wandered the halls, pausing at Maya's sketchbook left on a side table. Dragons and mansions intertwined, a child's blueprint for belonging. Dawn crept in, gray and accusatory as reports filtered. Neighbors' gossip mills churning. A discreet call from the family lawyer about incidents with prior staff. The rising stakes pressed. Elena's social circle, brittle as spun sugar, whispering of scandals that could tarnish galas. Rosa's visa teetering on the edge of revocation, her dreams of Maya's college fund evaporating like morning mist. Alexander felt the injustice metastasize, not just the kick, but the ecosystem that normalized it. Underpaid labor, overlooked bruises, the racial ledger where black pain was currency for white catharsis. By midday, the air hummed with unspoken ultimatums. Elena's allies texted platitudes. Rosa packed a duffel with quiet finality, her face a mask of the dignity that had sustained her through evictions and border crossings. Maya, bandaged and bewildered, clung to a stuffed elephant pilfered from the nursery, its trunk a question mark. Alexander stood at the crossroads of his empire, the weight of complicity bowing his shoulders. Every deferred conversation, every donation that absolved without atonement, converged here. The tension peaked as sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Not for them, but a reminder of the world's watchful eye. In that suspended agony, the man who quantified chaos confronted the unchartable, The human cost of indifference, the spark of one child's hurt igniting a fire that could consume or redeem. The atrium clock struck noon, its bells tolling like a summons to judgment. As Alexander gathered them all in the grand foyer, the heart of the house, where crystal droplets from the chandelier caught the fractured light like tears held in check. Elena descended the spiral staircase in a sheath of ivory silk, her chin lifted in the armor of denial, flanked by the invisible ghosts of her lineage. Rosa and Maya ascended from below, the child's hand swallowed in her mother's, their steps echoing the tentative bridge between servant stairs and the realm above. The storm had cleared, leaving a humidity that clung like unspoken accusations. The ocean beyond the windows a vast, indifferent witness. Alexander's voice, when it emerged, was steady as the algorithms he commanded, measured, incisive, devoid of the bombast Elena anticipated. He recounted the scene not with fury, but precision. The arc of her foot, the crumple of Maya's form, the echo of sobs against silk-upholstered walls. Elena's retort built like a wave. Deflections about stress, about boundaries in a home invaded by outsiders, but it crested and broke against his unyielding gaze. For the first time, he named it. Racism. Not as abstract villainy in history books, but as the poison in her veins, fed by generations who built fortunes on backs bent low. The word hung, electric, charging the air until Maya's gasp punctured it, her eyes wide with the dawning vocabulary of her own wounding. In that crucible, Alexander's shocking act unfolded not in violence, but severance, a blade of truth sharper than any kick. He turned to Elena, the woman he had vowed to cherish, and articulated the divorce papers already drafted in his mind's ledger. Assets divided. Her trusts intact but tainted, the mansion's deed rewriting to exclude her shadow. But it was the deeper cut that stunned. He knelt before Maya, not with pity's condescension, but reverence, offering not trinkets, but transformation. This home, he declared to the empty spaces where staff once shrank, will be yours to claim, not just clean. He extended to Rosa a partnership in the estate's management, a stake, equity in the very soil that had swallowed her sweat, turning maid into maven, invisible into indelible. Elena's world imploded in slow motion, her face drained to ash, hands clutching the banister as alliances crumbled in her periphery, texts buzzing with feigned shock from friends who had long mirrored her biases. She lunged forward, not with remorse but rage, her manicured nails raking air as she accused him of betrayal, of throwing away everything for some sob story. The foyer trembled with her unraveling, portraits of Harrington ancestors seeming to lean in judgment. Maya shrank back, but Rosa held firm, her spine straightening in the blaze of unaccustomed power, whispering to her daughter in Spanish of brujas undone by their own spells. The climax crested as Alexander activated the security. Feed, cameras he had installed for protection, now confessing complicity, projecting. Onto the smart wall a montage of micro-assaults, Elena's sneers at Rosa's accents, toys snatched from Maya's reach, dinner trays returned untouched with notes of disdain. The evidence looped, a digital noose exposing the lifetime of hidden hate Elena had cultivated like a secret garden of thorns. Sirens grew louder, not imagined, his preemptive call to authorities, framing the kick as assault, ensuring the scales tipped not toward wealth's impunity, but accountability's bite. Elena collapsed onto the stairs, sobs racking her frame, the empress dethroned in her own palace. In that raw apex, Alexander's transformation ignited. The mogul, once architect of evasion, became harbinger of reckoning. Maya's tentative hand found his, a bridge across the chasm while Rosa's tears carved paths of cathartic release. The ocean roared approval beyond the glass, waves crashing like applause for the fallen facade. No heroes emerged unscathed. Scars lingered in every gaze, but in the shattering, something purer forged, the audacity to dismantle one's throne for the dignity of another. Weeks blurred into a mosaic of aftermath, The Harrington estate shedding its skin like a serpent emerging, renewed. Elena's departure was a quiet exodus, limousines at dawn, trunks bulging with finery that now felt like chains, her social orbit contracting to echoes in group chats, invitations revoked with polite coughs of complications. The divorce proceedings unfolded in tabloid whispers, her narrative twisting into victimhood on podcasts that peddled grievance as gospel. But Alexander's evidence, those unblinking feeds, ensured the settlement favored restitution. Reparations funneled directly to racial justice funds. Her alimony laced with stipends for sensitivity training she would likely ignore. She vanished into a condo in Boca, a ghost in her own reflection, the kick's recoil etching lines of isolation where entitlement once bloomed. For Rosa and Maya, the shift was alchemy. The staff quarters expanded into sunlit suites overlooking the gardens. Maya's bed now piled with quilts of her own design. Dinosaurs romping across walls painted by local artists from the community center Alexander endowed. Rosa, no longer a shadow, helmed the household with a ledger of her own. Budgets balanced. Menus infused with her heritage. Decisions consulted in weekly circles that included Maya's input on everything from pool parties to philanthropy picks. School transformed too. Maya transferred to a progressive academy on full scholarship. Her braids adorned with beads from aunties in Guatemala. Her essays on hidden hurts earning teachers' quiet awe. The welt faded to a faint scar, a tattoo of triumph reminding her that vulnerability could forge weapons of words. Alexander's empire, once a monolith of metrics, cracked open to vulnerability. He shuttered the predictive firm's most invasive arms, redirecting algorithms toward equity audits, software that flagged biases in hiring, not just for profit, but repair. Boardrooms buzzed with discomfort as he shared the story anonymized, not as confession, but catalyst. We quantify risk, but ignore the human quotient, the cost of color in our codes. Donations swelled, but now tethered to action. Mentorships for immigrant entrepreneurs, legal clinics for domestic workers, Maya's Dinosaur Club evolving into a youth advocacy group where kids like her sketched futures unchained. The impact rippled outward. A stone skipped across Privilege's pond. Neighbors, peering over hedges, hosted awkward barbecues laced with apologies. The country club, under pressure from viral threads Alexander didn't start but didn't stop, mandated diversity audits that unearthed their own skeletons. Rosa's family reunited stateside, visas fast-tracked through channels Alexander lobbied, Maya's cousins filling the estate with laughter that drowned old silences. Yet scars persisted. Nights when Maya woke from dreams of flying heels, Rosa's hands still flinching at raised voices, Alexander staring at balance sheets haunted by what-ifs. The resolution wasn't erasure, but evolution. A family forged in fracture, where black excellence wasn't exception, but expectation. In the quiet evenings as sunsets bled gold over the Atlantic, they gathered on the veranda, Maya sketching, Rosa stirring herbal teas, Alexander listening more than leading. The takeaway crystallized not in triumph, but tenacity. Racism thrives in the shadows of inaction, but one witnessed wrong, one unthinkable stand, can flood it with light. What if every early homecoming unearthed a truth we dread? In a world wired for evasion, will you pause at the sob, or script the shock that saves? The waves whispered back, endless and unyielding. The story isn't over. It's yours to rewrite.